Okay, and thank you all for clicking whatever button Zoom just asked you to click. And thank you so much, Mariella, for leading us today. And I hope we all get the meditation sit that we need today. So over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you all again for being here. So as Brian said, we'll practice for about 20 minutes. If you would like to, as many of you already did, turn your camera on. If that makes you feel more comfortable, leave it on. If you want to close your eyes, or simply lower the gaze and find in a position that is comfortable, relaxed, and alert. And if today means you gotta take extra care of yourself and you want to lay down, allow yourself to do that as well. So I'm gonna ring the bell at the beginning and at the end to practice. If you want, you can use the sound of the bell as an invitation to bring all of your attention to this moment, to the here and now. And you may want to start by taking a couple of deeper breaths as you bring all of your attention to this moment. Inhaling deeply through the nose.
You've got an accent in addition to the.
And exhaling deeply through the nose. Just bringing all of your attention to this moment. The body being here. Perhaps also taking a moment to orient yourself in the space you're in. And you can do that by noticing the different sounds around you. Noticing smells. Feeling the temperature of the space you're in. Now bringing attention to the body, sensations in the body, and feeling the different points of contact of the body with the chair, the cushion, the sofa, whatever object you are sitting or laying down on. Just notice sensations in the back, sensations in the sit bones area, and the legs and the feet. Soles of the feet. And feeling the contact of the feet with the ground. Taking a moment to acknowledge the earth underneath you, holding you and holding us all of us. In this session and in this earth. For the next few moments, just resting in the awareness of being here, being alive. In this human body, noticing what is it like to be human right now. What does it feel like to inhabit this body? And with a sense of curiosity and a kind awareness. Allowing everything that is here to be here without a judgment. Being human in this body right now feels like this. As you sit here witnessing this human experience, see if you can feel the breath in the body. And rest your attention there in whichever part of the body is the easiest for you to experience the breath right now. Just resting the attention there. And again, with a sense of curiosity and an attention that is kind. Feeling the inhale and the exhale. Notice the different characteristics of the breath. Is the breath right now feeling deep or shallow? Is it feeling smooth or choppy? Somewhere in between, just acknowledging. Noticing also how you don't need to make the breath happen. The body knows how to breathe. Feeling the aliveness of this moment with each breath. And noticing how each breath, each moment is unique. It has never existed before and it never will. So we are practicing and cultivating being as present as we can for this life, for this moment passing through. And very naturally, the mind wanders, the mind gets carried away with sounds, if that's not your anchor, with images and thoughts. And that's very normal. That's what the mind does. And right now, the invitation is to simply notice when the mind drifted away from the breath or the anchor and return it back. Bring it back to the breath, bring it back to the anchor without a judgment. And see if you can really experience the breath in the body, not thinking about the breath, but really feeling it. Dropping the attention into the felt sense, the experience of the breath. Perhaps the attention is just a little bit more settled by now. And as the body continues to breathe, I'd like to invite you to expand the attention to other sensations in the body. Feeling the body from head to toes. Noticing what's present. Noticing sensations in the body. And remembering that we're welcoming every sensation that is here. They're welcome in this space. There's nothing wrong with them. There is nothing wrong with you feeling them. Sensations arise and they pass by. If we don't cling to them or resist them, they pass. Perhaps taking a moment to acknowledge what's the overall state of the body right now, the physical body. The body feeling rested, tired, the body feeling light or heavy. Do you notice physical pain or the absence of physical pain? Now take a moment to acknowledge the overall state of the mind. How is the mind feeling right now? Busy, quiet, or in between? If it helps, you can label the thoughts as just thinking, or you can label them as preoccupation, planning, whatever you notice. Thoughts are happening. They're not who you are. And see if you can notice the impermanence of the thoughts. They're a phenomenon that arises and passes by. They're not personal and they're not permanent. Now moving to the heart space and acknowledging what's there, what's the overall state of the heart. What emotions are present right now? Is the heart feeling closed or open? What emotions are present? Joy, sadness, frustration, numbness, whatever you notice. See if you can acknowledge what's here and allow it to be here to the best of your abilities. Whenever you notice resistance, that's okay. That's another thing you can notice. Do not resist the resistance. If you notice judgment, not judge the judgment. We're cultivating, creating space for those different experiences to be here. With enough awareness in which we don't cling to them or resist them, we just allow them to move, pass by. They arise, they pass by. Again, they're impermanent. There could be a wave of different emotions, and we can hold space for all of that. There's nothing wrong with any of them. We are welcome everything that is happening in this moment. We welcome them in this space. This is what being human feels like. Sensations are present, thoughts and feelings, emotions that are felt somewhere in the body. And some of those experiences might feel difficult to be with. And that's okay. You can notice that. Notice that it feels difficult to be with it. And see if you can be with the difficulty. I want to invite you to take a moment and ask yourself, what do I need to hear right now? What is a word or a phrase that will feel supportive to you in this moment? If you want to place one or two hands in the chest area, helps you connect more with the body, with the heart, and listening to what arises. What is that thing, that phrase or word that will feel supportive right now? And I invite you to offer that to yourself. I may feel I love you. This is hard. We'll get through this, whatever that is, anything that resonates with you right now. Notice how the body feels when you offer that to yourself, that kind of support, that kind of compassion. Maybe what you need to receive right now is a hug, and you can hug yourself. And rest in that feeling of support. And remember that this is always available to you whenever you want to access it. This quality of attention with yourself, it's always there with you. And as we approach the end of this practice, as I always do, I like to end with inviting you to bring attention to gratitude. Find something that you can be grateful for in this moment. That could be a part of the body, a person, a pet, an object, a situation, whatever that is. And see if you can find gratitude. And notice where in the body you experience gratitude. How is gratitude felt in the body? Get to know gratitude, savor your gratitude. And take a moment and find gratitude for yourself for having made the time to be here with you. To give this time to you and to be with you in this way. You could have been doing something completely different, but you chose to be here. And in a world full of distractions, things that want to grab our attention, to make time to be with ourselves. It's starting to feel to me like an act of a heroic act, an act of radical love and radical acceptance. That might resonate with you. Really honor yourself. And after I ring the bell, see if you can make the rest of the time here together, the rest of your day, a continuation of your practice where you don't stop the practice here, the moment to moment, kind, curious, and loving awareness continues after. When you're ready, I'm gonna bring movement to the body, and when you open your eyes without rushing, letting light, colors, and shapes come to you. And when you're ready, join us back on the screen. So we move in transition to our wonderful talk, and thank you all for your practice. And Jamie, looking forward to our talk today.
Thank you, Mariella, for your set.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mariella. Yes. I'm so glad we all got to sit together, practice together. And we are still the InsightLA Mindfulness and Deep Suffering Practice Group. We like to call this the H.O.P.E group. Healing ourselves through the present experience. H.O.P.E, H.O.P.E group. And it's a treat. It's our about once a month. We have the wonderful Dr. Jamie Gamboa here. Hi, Jamie.
Brian.
Show everybody your coffee mug.
Oh, look at this little baby raccoon.
Look at that raccoon.
Adorable. I love raccoons.
And today we are talking about a very interesting newish term that has come about that adolescents are using, but I'm sure others are probably using it as well. It may have started online in communities with younger folks. This concept of feeling unalive, so unalive, in the context of deep suffering and suicide. So, Jamie, what was your first impression or impressions when you heard the term unalive in the context of deep suffering and conversations online, TikTok, etc., about suicide that did not attract the kind of attention with the algorithms and maybe adults hearing these kind of terms? So what was your first impressions of unalive?
Yeah, so of course, hearing about it, being myself, I went and did a very thorough Google search on the history. So fun fact, it seems like it originated in 2013 when it was in an episode of The Ultimate Spider-Man. Good old Spider-Man. So it does seem like it's showing up increasingly in searches as of this past year, which is interesting that this term's been around a little while since, Spider-Man coined it for us. But now people are searching for it more aware of it, using it more. So it's become increasingly something that people are gravitating towards. And so, of course, it is being used to avoid being censored by the algorithms. So if you're a young person, you're on the internet and you're trying to talk about this feeling you have sometimes, that sometimes you wish that you weren't alive, but you don't want your post to be flagged for removal by the algorithms on Instagram or TikTok or Reddit or whatever forum you're using to try to connect and talk about your experience. And so young people and adults too have been gravitating towards Unalive, as in, like, sometimes I want to unalive myself. So it's a way of getting around the algorithm. And my first emotional impression was that it was really creative and really lovely that people felt this need to connect and to talk about this so strongly, that they came up with this new lexical invention in order to facilitate their ability to do so. And I think also it really speaks to misguided attempts to avoid talking about suicide and other topics related to deep suffering, things that are hard or painful to talk about. I know another one that's often used in social media is mascara. I don't know if you've heard of that one, Brian, but mascara is apparently being used to talk about sexual assault, because that's another one that gets flagged by algorithms, and posts will be flagged for removal if you use the term sexual assault. And so instead, people are saying mascara, so that it enables them to still continue to talk about this and connect about it. And even in the suicide prevention community, as you know, Brian, this is something that people debate about. I'm remembering in one of the suicide prevention groups we were in, there was some dialogue about a play about suicide. Do you remember this, Brian? That was
Yeah.
held at a local university and then it was canceled. And there was dialogue even within the suicide prevention community, because I felt like that was really unfortunate that it was being censored and that this play was not being held at the university because administrative staff was worried that it may be upsetting for students to watch or potentially triggering for people who have their own struggles with suicidality. And there were people who were backing up that decision and saying, yeah, it makes sense and it's probably for the best because you don't want to, trigger students and not have resources to support them. And definitely there should be resources to support them. That's a separate issue, very much an issue. But again, there's this theme, this concern that if you talk about suicide, you might make it worse, or put ideas in someone's head or trigger them, resulting in somebody dying by suicide, acting on those thoughts to unalive themselves. And at the same time, people are finding ways to get around censorship of this topic because they need to connect so deeply.
Yeah. And aren't people always going to find ways to talk about this, whether it's writing about deep suffering, fantasies about what it would be like to not be suffering anymore, grief, and whether it's writing poetry, 200 years ago, or I mean,
Okay.
or
Right.
yesterday,
Okay, Brian.
or, right, or writing poetry this morning, or or a ballet, or how many pieces of incredible, amazing um, classical music have been written about the suffering that's gone on. I mean, we don't know, or maybe people don't know what was happening in Tchaikovsky's life or Mahler's life or whomever, but people are going to find a way. I agree with what you said. People are going to find a way to let others know this is hard. And hopefully other people can recognize that and say, I see you, I see your pain. And ideally, me too, versus calling 911 on somebody, or the old, sinful, that's a crime. That's all these old, the pathologizing, the criminalizing, the judging people for suffering, for experiencing suffering.
Right. And my sense of it is like, yes, of course, we are always going to find a way to express deep suffering through art or otherwise, and also to talk about it with one another. And I feel like the message that we get when we're told don't talk about that, or when our post gets just removed, is okay, that's not an okay way to feel. That's not the way you should be feeling. But nevertheless, people are feeling it and want to talk about it. And actually being given the ability to do so, to talk to people on Reddit and make posts about, sometimes I want to unalive myself. And other people being like, yeah, me too. And here's what I do when I feel that way. People live all the time, as we know, having persistent thoughts of wanting not to be alive, or intermittent thoughts. And being able to talk about it helps you live with wanting to unalive yourself. Otherwise, it's a thing that you carry around in secret, because
Yeah,
not talking about it doesn't remove it.
right. The secrets and the secrets and the secrets. And I mean, secrets are, it feels like it's one of the reasons I said what I said earlier about the death in our family recently, is that it feels like, well, how would you describe, or even in your own experience, Jamie, because about secrets and feeling like you need to keep something to yourself. I'm not talking about privacy and discretion. I'm talking about, like the secrets. For me, it feels like poison. It feels like a poison. It's like something toxic about keeping, whether it's someone died and I don't want to say, or I am feeling discouraged about the future and I don't really see a future any different from the present. I mean, secrets are, well, it's awful.
Yeah. And there's a lot of reasons for it. Part of it is sometimes people talk about this a lot. There's not like a social script or a protocol for how to have conversations about deep suffering or death or suicide. And so when it gets brought up, sometimes people get uncomfortable and it's hard for them to talk about. And so the meta communication oftentimes is, ooh, that was kind of impolite. It's like a social faux pas to bring up. That's not something we talk about in polite company. And this is something that I definitely experienced a lot and still do. Like in my personal life, being from the deep South, there's a lot of, oh, we don't talk about things like that in polite company. Those are things that are private, and you deal with that yourself. And polite company then extends to like even your family of origin, you don't talk about it. So where do you talk about it?
Yeah, where do you talk about it? And then, yeah, and then it's suffocating.
Mm-hmm.
Suffocating. And I know that however many hundreds of calls that we've taken at the crisis hotline, or whether it's clients, but also in our personal life, it's, therapists are people. We we have relationships. Jamie, I don't know if you knew this, you're a normal person.
I'm not a normal
No,
person.
you are not a
I'm
normal person.
alien.
But when people are talking about the secrets that they have, or that they, well, I'll speak for myself. It feels claustrophobic. It feels like drowning.
Oh my.
I think about the people that I've lost to suicide and those times where I've struggled myself. And it's like they're running out of oxygen. And if only I could tell someone, but, but, there's always the but. But what if they call the police? But what if they, or this has sort of been my thing in the past, like if I say it, they can never they can
Mhm.
never unhear it. They can never, it's like once you ring that bell, oh, and then am I crazy for the rest? Am I going to be crazy in your eyes for the rest of? It's something about that permanent record, like from school. This is going on your permanent. record, and it's really, really scary. And people say, well, tell me what's wrong. Tell me what you're thinking. It's not that easy.
Right. And then sometimes people say that, but don't actually seem to want to hear. They say, "How are you?" And you're expected to say, "Oh, I'm fine. Thank you. How are you?" Um, and so when people ask, "How are you?" There have been periods of time in my life when I really hated that question because I didn't know what people meant by it and wish they would be more specific. Like, how much do you actually want to know? So it's very hard to uh, have an answer to that that is what the person is wanting or asking for. But what you said about a permanent record, I think a lot of us do worry about how what we disclose to others may affect how they perceive us and our relationship with them moving forward. Maybe we'll lose relationships if we're a little bit too honest when somebody asks, "How are you?" And going back to the internet, this is something, and I'm going to sound real old, I suppose, when I say this, but it wasn't so much of a thing when we were young. We did all kinds of stupid stuff, and there was no public record of it, except for in people's memories, which are fallible. But on social media, you know, there is a permanent record of all of these things that you're thinking and saying and doing. And people are navigating that in different ways, trying to create levels of privacy and anonymity while still having these conversations in internet spaces.
Yeah, it must be just so overwhelming to be, I mean, pick your age, right? 13, 15, 16, 18. I mean, it's hard at any age right now, but in those formative years when we're, developmentally, we're moving away from the people that have raised us and taught us how to, you know, feed
Mhm.
ourselves and clothe ourselves, and then we're trying to figure out who we are. And at that time, everything is not, maybe not everything, but certainly probably feels like all the parts of our lives that normally um, private
Mhm.
are not. And this concept of unalive too, back to that, I mean, who wouldn't want a break from all that? Who wouldn't want to numb out
Mhm. Yeah.
or to have a
People
break,
feel
have a break?
that to varying degrees and in different ways. Sometimes it's like, I used to say it would be nice if there was a button you could hit and then you would just kind of like stop existing for a couple days and then you could come back afterwards. Maybe I just like want to leave the country for a little while. Um, I remember when I was in my doctorate program and I was so stressed. I don't know if I told you about this, Brian. There was one day like I was there. The thing about being in a doctorate program is you're gonna have to make sacrifices to do all the work and yada yada. But your personal life in general doesn't stop because you're in an academic program. So real life is happening, things are happening, you're coping with that. Also, you're getting a lot of toxic messages about uh, do self care, but not really. So I remember I was driving past, one of those Spirit Halloween stores. So I'm driving past a Spirit Halloween store and I'm like, oh, you know what? I could quit the doctorate program and I could go work at a Halloween store. And that's fine. You know what? That would be so much easier. So that was me wanting to like opt out of all the things happening in my life without necessarily unaliving. But thoughts like that, like I want to like blow up my life and work at the Spirit Halloween store, and thoughts like, you know what, I really don't want to be alive right now, are really not that dissimilar. They're coming from a similar place.
Yeah, exactly. And to be able to say that out loud, whether it's to a friend or a therapist or a sponsor or somebody on a park bench or on the next train seat over or an airplane seat and say, if and I isn't it great when if we're lucky enough if we're lucky enough to have a therapist, maybe a therapist like you, Jamie, that says, well, if you could opt out of your life for a while, or if you were to leave, what would you do?
Mhm.
Sort of like a variation on the miracle question. Um,
Right.
I mean, it's interesting. I wonder if anybody's ever come up with like a miracle suicide question. And I realize
Mhm.
it's a there's kind of like a surplus reality part of it, this kind of like imaginative space. If you
Yeah.
if you could have a break for
Mhm.
3 days, which is
Right.
really what, yeah, like you said, that's what the deep suffering is. Oh, I just want, if you could have a 3-day break, what would you do?
It's a fantasy. And maybe you would work at the Halloween store or
Yeah.
go to, I don't know, France. Or maybe you would just not do anything. And when I say not do anything, I don't mean like watch a lot of Netflix, but maybe you'll just literally not exist
Yeah.
and just not feel or think anything for 3 days. And to a lot of people, that's what sounds appealing when they want to opt out. And that's connected to that feeling of, wanting to unalive yourself, because living does hurt a lot of the time. And we don't like to talk about that, but there are times when living hurts. And we do want to opt out to varying degrees and in different ways. And I think I say this all the time. There is this perception of mental health struggles in society, that a mental health crisis is an acute crisis. It's a thing that like is an emergency, like if you break your leg or something. So you find out about it, you address it, you set the leg, and then you heal, and then the crisis is averted. And people don't really know what to do or how to interact with people when the crisis is not actually a crisis. It's your baseline way of being. It's persistent. It makes me think of a podcast I really like. I don't know if I recommended this to you already, Brian. It's called Terrible Thanks for Asking by Nora McInerney. And it's a podcast about grief and deep suffering. She started it after her husband died of cancer. And people were always like, Nora, how are you? And this is what she really wanted to say. Oh, I'm terrible. Thanks for asking. Going back to that question of how are you and how difficult that can be, trying to feel out, okay, what are you actually asking and what do you want to hear from me? Do you want to hear, oh, fine, thank you? Or do you want to hear like, oh, yeah, it's hard, but I'm doing okay? And how hard it is to answer that question when you are going through something that is persistent. Because it kind of feels like when something first happens, like, someone dies, you have a loss, and everyone expects you're going to be grieving for a few weeks or a month. And they say, oh, how are you? How are you holding up? I'm doing okay, thank you. They expect that you're grieving and in pain. But what do you do when they keep asking months and months, maybe years later, and you still feel like I'm still terrible? Like there's this expectation of eventually you feel better. And it almost kind of feels like you're letting people down sometimes when you don't feel better.
Yeah, letting people down, letting yourself down. Yeah, sometimes people say, I've said it. I'm sorry, I'm not doing better. I'm
Mhm.
sorry. I'm sorry. Um, and isn't it nice to be able to, in spaces, maybe like this, when there's a safe harbor, so to speak, where we can kind of leave the apologies. I'm sorry for suffering. Like, okay, maybe I don't need to be sorry. Um, and thank goodness, because that second arrow, the I'm so sorry that I'm not doing better. I'm sorry I'm not doing my life right.
Right.
Um,
Suffering, and I have to feel bad about suffering on top of the suffering.
yeah,
That's,
and that's too much suffering. And hence, those of us want a break.
mhm.
Um, Anyways, Jamie, maybe the last comments. Maybe I can ask you a hypothetical question. Let me
Oh,
ask you a hypothetical question.
okay.
If you had, let's say, a 16-year-old client that came in
Mhm.
and they said, hey, I heard about this term, unalive, feeling unalive. Uh, I like it, but I also feel a little bit weird about using it because it's some people might not understand me,
Mhm.
but some people will.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, by the way, this 15-year-old has a lot to say. I don't know, all of a sudden this 15-year-old's having a soliloquy at you. But I like it, but I don't know if people are going to understand me. Should I keep using it? Should I? Okay, and then you tell. Okay, 15-year-old, let me answer your question. Okay, go ahead.
I call all of my clients by their ages.
Okay,
32-year-old.
15-year-old.
Right, 32-year-old. How you doing today? No,
Uh,
but I think primarily I would want to know, first of all, like, well, tell me about what fits for you about the idea of feeling unalive or wanting to be unalive. Where did you first hear it? What came up for you when you first heard it? How did it make you feel? How does it feel when you think about that with your own experience? When you say that you sometimes want to be unalive, which, would normalize, of course, like, we all feel like that sometimes to varying degrees, although it's not something that we feel like we're able to talk about. And I'm glad you could talk about it here. When you feel like you feel unalive or you want to be unalive, can you tell me more about what that's like for you? And also, I think really framing the term as a way to find people who do understand. Because I wish I could say, oh, everyone will understand, but a lot of people won't actually. And it's really cool that you can use a term as a way of kind of like finding your people and finding the people who it is safe to talk about it with.
Fantastic. And the 15-year-old would say, you are a really good therapist. How
I'll say,
much
yes,
do I owe you?
thank you very much. You owe me $5 million.
$5 million. Okay. Can you
But I
refer
take
me out?
insurance, so it's
Oh,
okay.
good. Oh, good, good, good. Well, again, oh, and I love the question about the miracle question. Maybe we can chat about that in a moment when we have our discussion. Jamie, Dr. Gamboa, thank you so much for being here as part of our Sitting with Suicide series. And maybe, not maybe, I think a lot of us have seen that September is Suicide Awareness Month. Some people prefer, well, some people like to call it Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, but others of us find that the focus exclusively on suicide prevention obscures or misses out on another part of it. Well, okay, well, what else is there except prevention? And how do we prevent, how do we stop something that's human? So hence some people prefer to refer to it as Suicide Awareness Month. And so, Jamie, I'm really glad that you're here every month, and particularly this month, to talk about and sit with and be in dialogue about deep suffering. And maybe the point of this life is not to prevent things like, don't be sad, don't be angry, don't think about what life would be like if you're no longer alive, but finding people and places where we can share that and connect about it. So thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay, I'm going to turn off the recording now.